Hey class, welcome to the term. It's summer 2, getting started. Hopefully you've had time to look over the overview of the class. You've had time to look at the syllabus, get some sort of idea about what the class is about. Certainly we'll explore budgeting and finance and the fire service, EMS, in the public sector. And I hope you enjoy the class. So if you hadn't had time to look over the syllabus, the information, please take time to do that now. Please take time to acknowledge that you've read the syllabus, share a short introduction, and then of course look at the announcements, paying particular attention to the discussion post, how I want you to write your papers using APA, support your papers, discussions, etc. Some of you have had me before looking at the class, and you know pretty much I'd like to have those posts and papers developed. Some of you have not. Of course, I'll work with you, dedicate considerable time to trying to help you with the class, not just understanding the material, but certainly also trying to help you with APA and writing and that sort of thing. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to work with you. Those of you that have had me before, as I said, y'all guys or gals are used to me, good or bad. And then if you haven't, then you'll get used to me. So I'll give you 110%, try to help you throughout the class as much as possible. So our first assignment this week, and aside from looking at that syllabus and looking through the class getting started, is to really take a look at some of the alternatives that we have for funding for emergency medical services. We take a look at the budget, sort of understand the budget process in the local community. So looking at the background of most of you, it appears that you've probably seen those budgets. You may or may not have been in those budget meetings at the department level or at the city or township or borough, wherever you live at that level, but you have some sort of idea about the budget. You know what you can spend, what you can't, or it rolls down and you at least get to see that or know or hear the discussion, something. So in this case, in the class, we'll change it up a bit. If you've not had any opportunity in the past in your work to really work with budgets, we at least will give you a bit of an understanding about the budget process, some of the challenges that's associated with that as we move forward. Now, fire service is interesting because we compete with other public sectors within a community. We compete with those. If you're in the city and the township government, a county government, etc., then you compete with those different offices for the budget. And so, we may want to buy new apparatus, we want to replace the air packs, or buy a thermal imager. We don't, maybe we need a new ladder truck this year. Law enforcement would like to replace the vehicles, or buy body cameras, etc. If the utility, power, water, etc. is owned by your community, then there's some competition there. Maybe they want to upgrade the meters. So there's a lot of competition, and there's different funding mechanisms that a community sets up. Now, police and fire, obviously with police, we write there's fines. And in most cases, unless the department is just making a lot of arrests and collecting on those arrests and, writing a lot of traffic citations, etc., there's never enough funding. It really depends on, the community. That may be the case in a small community with one patrol officer, 2 patrol officers, and a car. But in a large community with different divisions, it's just not the case. And with same thing with fire, we don't collect. Fire, one could say that, and I've heard this stated before, fire costs the community money, because we don't really have any way to collect revenue. Few departments charge for services. We don't charge for hazmat responses all the time. Some communities do. and we can get reimbursed, although in my experience that seems to take considerable time when you do get reimbursed. So we have to convince the leadership in some cases in the community that by having fire service, having public safety, it's not costing anything. By having law enforcement, by having fire service, it really saves money. When you take a look at response, you look at the ISO rating, etc. That's where the money's saved. And in terms of reduced insurance cost, enhanced services to the public, but it's hard to see that on the front end. When we're balancing the budget, it's hard to see that on the front end. So we have to be able to convince the leadership and sometimes the public that it's worth it. And then if you work for a department that has a union, not every, for example, here, not every department has a union, and it's not like it is in the Northeast, so it's a little bit different. Some communities don't recognize the union. So there has to be, from the leadership standpoint, from a city, town, borough, county, a parish, etc., there has to be some consideration, on the negotiations with the union, with pay raises, etc. So all that has to be fitted in and considered, and we'll discuss that. So EMS. Now, in our discussion this week, we'll talk a little bit about some funding alternatives for emergency medical services, and I've included in the post different types of EMS. It's not the same everywhere. Fire-based EMS, we have private services. Many of you mentioned that, maybe you work for AMR or another service. There may be a county service, a township, a borough service, and then I mentioned the public utility model, which there's not many of those in the country. We happen to have one here. There's one in Oklahoma City, one in Fort Worth. So, take a look at those. Lots of different ways to structure EMS, and in my state, there's different ways to structure fire service. California, has created fire authorities because they had some issues with a private contractor there. So the way the city changed it is they created a fire authority and essentially bumped the private company out. I can't remember if that was Rural Metro who was providing service to them. So there's lots of different ways to do that, and we see that in our book this week. We have a PDF. There's a link here, if I could bring it up. Hopefully you can see it in the background. Funding alternatives for emergency medical services. A lot of ways to do that. And in budgeting, even though we have a lot of resources, a lot of ways to do it, or in the manual, it does take a lot of work. Everyone's competing for the same grant funding. Depending on how the service, if it's an authority, etc. There may be funding there, but the bottom line is, if you're not transporting patients, as I said in the discussion, then that revenue stream is light, and sometimes it may service. Now, we see private services here, and it may be happening in Massachusetts and Northeast. Private services here are closing left and right, even in small communities, even in larger communities. They're going out. Because they don't have exclusivity, they don't have, and we'll talk some about exclusivity. They don't have a stream. There's no funding stream. So if you have a private service, then they are a public utility model, an authority, something. Then that money it has to come in by transports, and so in order to do that, you make your money on non-emergency transports and standbys at football games, that sort of thing. Unless you're doing that as a community service, you're not making money on emergencies because most of them don't pay. You have to have that funding stream, and that usually is provided by non-emergency transfers from nursing homes, from hospitals, to and fro. And that's how you really pay for that. On the fire-based system, most fire-based systems don't do that. They don't do non-emergencies. They have a private contractor that does that. Like Memphis, Tennessee, for example, has a huge EMS-based system, but they don't do non-emergencies. It's all funded with taxpayer dollars on the fire side. And then, so that's how they get their revenue stream. It's difficult to expand. And so that's another consideration, is adding that, providing both BLS and ALS, not just ALS, as we see in some communities. It used to be BLS, then we went to ALS, and now we're going back to both, a tiered system, if you will, where we have BLS responses to certain calls, and then ALS intercepts, or an ALS unit is sent in order to reduce the number of paramedics that we need. We can't get paramedics in a lot of places. Maybe a fire-based service, but when it comes to private authorities, public utilities, those different models, we're not getting those paramedics. They're going to be nurses or professors or something else. So by adding a BLS service, or adding BLS, now we can send basics and intermediates, or what we call now advanced, to those calls, and it didn't always require an ALS unit. And so there's some changes there. But how do we fund that? So read the book, read the discussion, read some of these ideas. I want you to share those in your discussion. Make sure you pay close attention to the announcements, the syllabus, all the instructions. Share that in your paper. Share that in your discussions. I'll be jumping in, and we'll see you soon. I hope you have a great week. I'm excited to have an opportunity to work with each of you this term. If you have any questions, pick the phone up and give me a call, day or night, weekends, and I'll do my best to help you. So should be a good term. I'm excited to have you. We'll see you soon. I'll check back in. Today's Monday. I'll check back in Wednesday or Thursday. And I'll be jumping into discussions this week too. Even though we have a holiday, I'm working just like you are. So see you soon. Have a great week, and enjoy the class.